You're listening to The Capital Table. Private capital markets have been evolving for many years, but never more so than in recent times. Take a seat at the Capital Table with leading experts discussing insights into the private equity and M&A worlds, and take away the knowledge you need to excel in a rapidly changing marketplace. We know this is one table you'll leave feeling full and satisfied.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Capital Table, part two in our three-part series with Paul Marino, Osatis, and Goldbergs, as we talk about the deal market and really specifically the difficulty of closing deals in the middle market today. Episode one, we were able to cover some of the economic and market-specific challenges, which brings us to today. We're going to overview some financing considerations, geopolitical factors, and human capital. So, Paul, again, welcome back to the Capital Table.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me. It was I'm looking forward to our discussion. Our last discussion was great, so I know this one will be just as good or if not better.
Well, for our audience, now that you're on the edge of your seat, let's get going, Paul. So I think that, certainly one thing that's been a challenge amongst others in the last 18 to 24 months has been the credit markets and securing financing for deals. What are you seeing in terms of the difficulty for buyers to secure financing for a transaction?
Yeah, what we're seeing is traditional commercial banks have really started to. Well, let me rewind the tape. In last year or a year and a half ago, when Signature Bank and a few other banks collapsed, it really set off a lot of alarms in both the Fed and a lot of these middle market commercial banks. And these regional middle market commercial banks are not the big money center banks. It's not Wells, it's not Bank of America, it's not Citibank or JPM. And, they rely on the middle market commercial space for a lot of their deposits. And they've really moved away from lending in the space, mostly to shore up their balance sheets and really as a kind of a heavy-handed Fed, because the Fed did not want to have any other issues. So what has happened is the private market has moved in, and private credit has really taken off in that space. With that being said, in the upper end of the middle market, let's say $500 million to $1 billion, if that's, and again, we defined the middle market on our last podcast as below 500, really between 250, 0 to 200 million. Right. The private credit has kind of come into that lower end, and these middle market companies are way more dollar sensitive than especially the lower middle market than companies in the upper end of the space. So what you're seeing now is a really pause on deal flow because they're trying because a lot of buyers are trying to reprice deals that worked 2 years ago at lower rates and maybe less covenants that now may not work because, again, if you're paying 12 times EBITDA, how long is it going to take for you to get your money back, right? If things are not on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in our universe of the clients we're working with, which crosses all segments of private equity, to your point, the private credit funds, the debt funds, the mezzanine lenders certainly have become much more active in the last 12 months. And I'm defining active in that statement as seeing deal flow, being out in the market, looking for transactions, and feel that they have a better solution to the market and better opportunities. I think along with the theme of this whole series we're on, getting those deals closed is another topic, but certainly the
private credit for all intent and purpose should really be able to close much faster because you don't have all of the regulatory hurdles or burdens, have all these boxes that need to be checked. And again, that's really what regional banks, like you're out in Chicago, there used to be a bank called LaSalle that was a tremendous middle market lender. And, and really one of the big issues it has been that a lot of these middle market underwriters from commercial banks have either been whittled down, fired, or left, or whatever. And they're the ones, a lot of those guys are now running these credit funds. So they can underwrite deals better than a lot of their peer group in a commercial bank. Now, with that being said, it's cost of capital. And if you're looking at, alternative financing sources, and you're a middle market private equity or independent sponsor, equity becomes so much more important now because debt is just, more expensive, and it's hard to get equity, which is why the deal market has slowed down.
Right. Absolutely. So you mentioned, with that and the cost of capital increasing the last couple of years, that many buyers are trying to retrade, which of course means change the price. But what are you seeing in terms of more complex deal structures to kind of navigate through these times, and what's working and what's not?
Well, I mean, whatever works is what's going to work, right? And I say that it's cheap, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have two parties and willing to do a deal, and the bid-ask spread to me still is still pretty wide. But with that being said, for about an 8-year period of time, 10-year period of time, you never saw earnouts. I mean, never's a forever word, but you rarely saw them. Today, you see earnouts in much greater frequency, and you also see firms rolling over equity more. Sellers rolling over equity, to get to a certain price point. So, Steve, it's really a question of, and again, I'll say this over and over again. It's a question of sentiment, right? So, if I'm a buyer and I really want to sell, and and I'm a seller, if I'm a seller and I really want to sell, and I'm a buyer and I really want to buy, they're going to come up with some, levers that will make the deal go. Now, a big issue is earnouts, right? Historically, I'm old enough to remember there were people who were so dismayed by them, and they felt like there was the litigation waiting to happen. Well, they could be, or they would be, if they're drafted in a way that that you need a degree from MIT and advanced astrophysics to understand them. But if they're simple and easily achievable, if you hit a metric, they're great. They're great for the buyer, and they're great for the seller. And same thing with rolling over equity. With that being said, there are two types of sellers right now. One is seller who's kind of run at the end of his runway, and he wants to just dump out of the business because he's old, and they're really much less apt to roll over equity because they want to be out. And two, there's a seller who wants a second bite of the apple, and that guy's happy to roll over equity because why? Because now he can get twice the return or the equity kicker. And that's the reality of the market right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on it. I guess rounding out the discussion on capital, the diminished availability of private equity capital. What are some of the dynamics you're seeing? And certainly that somewhat goes hand in hand with the availability of deals, which fortunately we're seeing kind of change in real time here, getting better. But it's been tough sledding the last 18 months. Yeah,
100%. Let me just add to this. I was out the other night with a very successful investment banker from a well-known middle market shop, and what he was telling me is that their pipeline is really full, and they are starting to see a thawing out on the upper end of the middle market. And a lot of that is very large private equity firms coming down and doing deals because they have to deploy capital. In the middle market and lower middle market, really, it's really controlled by family offices, and family offices really want to do direct deals. And I think that when valuations start to either come down or they feel like they're at a good spot, you're going to see the market really rip again. I mean, I don't know when that is, but I do think that will be coming sooner rather than later, because, people want to get paid, and usually you have a trickle down effect. And I think we spoke about that the last time. When guys up top are doing deals at the larger, it starts to push everything further down.
Yeah, and I'll add to that how you described the person you had dinner with. I had breakfast with a very exact same profile person last week, and same thing. All the comments you made, which I won't repeat, but certainly emphasize the pipeline is filling up and they're active. So, we're hopefully pulling out of this, and I think that'll be interesting as we finish this calendar year and move into the next one. But we shall see on that, and more on that on a different capital table. But let's interject into the conversation these, at least a couple of the geopolitical factors. There's a number of them, but let's talk about global trade and the uncertainty around that and what you're seeing and what you think private equity in particular is navigating through, and their portfolio companies and those trying to sell. I guess.
Yeah. So, I think that you hear a lot about tariffs. Trump is a big tariff fan, and I think if you see that the Biden administration, I think Vice President Harris would likely follow the same suit as what President Biden has, left these tariffs in place that Trump had put on, when he was president. And they really can impact much larger global firms. But for the purposes of our discussion and talking about middle market, lower middle market companies, I mean, tariffs could really do a lot of good for these companies. And the reason why is simple. If they don't have to, if you're running a smaller non-service based manufacturer, light manufacturing otherwise, and your competitors are coming in from a low cost center like China, et cetera, and you're getting preference because you're manufacturing here in the US, I mean, that could really, really take hold and do wonders for your business. So I think you're going to see that. I also see a lot of folks now looking at more manufacturing deals, looking to put capital into smaller light manufacturing and manufacturing on a localized level. And the more you see that, the better it's going to be for a lower middle market PE.
And what are you saying in terms of, cross-border middle market M&A, the impacts of the geopolitical instability around the world? And, I think just to add one thing we're seeing recently on your last comment, foreign investors looking for U.S. assets, whether in
100%.
anticipation of increased tariffs or just recognizing that the political winds have shifted in a global sense, that they need to be able to produce in the United States to more effectively access the United States market.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at places like Japan is very active in our space. I mean, very active. And the reason why is simple. One, demographics. Japan has one of the oldest of the G7. I think it's either one or two. South Korea is same, but South Korea is active in the U.S. buying companies, wherever they can't manufacture or don't have the people to manufacture in Japan anymore, and they're coming here. Plus, it's a lower cost of energy and low cost of labor. So yeah, you're definitely going to see that. And two, again, I mean, I just said energy costs here are not going to go up; they're going to go down. And that is actually an interesting dynamic, because under the, if you have Vice President Harris become president and they push to more of a new Green Deal, it's going to actually increase costs of energy, or could, I should say, I don't know, sure. But if you have Trump and, they use more of the federal power to get nuclear going, which could still take 5 or 10 years for it to develop a plant, or more nat gas. The cost of energy is such a big component of manufacturing that if you can lower the cost of energy, right, I mean, you can really become a pace setter for manufacturing. And as far as cross-border goes, look, I'll tell you, we don't deal with a lot with Mexico, but we deal with a lot with Canada. And there's a lot of money in Canada that can't be put to use in Canada just based on population that just don't have enough, I'll say resources, but people. So they're pushing a lot of that money down here in the States.
Yeah, let's round out geopolitical factors with a discussion on regulatory changes. I mean, maybe not as pronounced of the threat of any significant tax law changes that impact M&A, but certainly that shifts are always on the horizon. Certainly the regulatory environment and the whole environmental policy issue. I mean, what are your thoughts around regulatory?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Steve, this is one of the biggest, and again, I don't want to make it a political statement because, my job is to make money no matter who's in office, right? And to help my clients do that. And I will tell you that the regulatory environment right now has been challenging, to say the least, between the FTC, the FCC, the SEC, all these alphabet agencies have really been very difficult to operate in. Now, if Vice President Harris is elected, I don't know if she goes with the same folks or not. Unclear, in these that they had these agencies or to have the same glide path. I would assume under Trump that they would lessen the burden of the regulatory body, but it does play a big, plays an impact or plays a part in it because it impacts the market, tremendously. Moreover, and I just have to say the amount of uncertainty when you're going to do a deal is huge. And here, let me just give you on the mega deal basis. There was a rumor that Qualcomm was going to buy Intel. In the paper, I'm not making it up or giving it.
Right.
And imagine that right now. Now, the reason why they didn't and what they said was they're going to wait until after the election to see what the roadmap would be because the regulatory burden. Now, I do think, based upon who are some of Trump's advisors, that if Trump was elected, he may end up being more of a trust buster than you would think and pushing to break up. So there is going to be a lot of moving parts here that we're going to have to see how it all fleshes out.
Right. Well, and to your point, or analogous to your point, moving parts create opportunities in the M&A
100%.
market that create opportunities for private equity, family offices, and independent sponsors to find deals. But along the similar lines of uncertainties, I think one of the big uncertainties, certainly in the United States and many parts of the world right now, is human capital. There's a shortage of talent, and I think that's contributing to why it's hard to get deals across the line. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, the demographics don't lie, right? So, you have the largest demographic in U.S. history retiring out or almost all retired in the baby boom. You have a small demographic, Gen X, and then a larger one. And I know the millennials get made fun of by Gen Xers and baby boomers to an extent. But, the truth of the matter is that they graduated high school or college during the dot-com bust, and then they've lived through the GFC and then COVID. So I think they've had 3 real speed bumps in their glide path. So if things normalize out and there's no huge, air pocket that throws them off, I think the millennials will slide in and fill up a lot of those jobs that the baby boom has left open. But, talk to anybody who does light manufacturing, try to find a welder or somebody, who can do precision work like that. It's very difficult. So, yeah, it plays a big part.
Yeah, I know certainly we're seeing requests more and more so from clients who are on the buy side to really dig into the workforce and retention rates and more importantly, where there may be gaps in the workforce so that they're not acquiring a business that's going to struggle being able to execute. Because obviously at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You make an investment, you need a business that performs, and you need the assets, whether they be human capital or equipment or technology, to execute the business plan. So really subject of several podcasts in and of itself, but talent shortages are important. And I think that's leading to, some of the succession planning issues. And again, which is driving some of the thought process of potential sellers. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, for the most part, most people most middle market are first gen, right? First gen owners. So, the owner has got to work every day, and, it's almost like kind of running a deli, right? You're just there every day, turning the lights on, trying to make as many sandwiches as you can and keep expanding, and keep bringing in more revenue. And they're not necessarily concerned about a lot of other things that maybe a private equity firm would look at and increase profitability or what have you. Now, I'm not saying they don't want to make a lot of money, but what they want to do is they want to sell more and make more, and have more revenue. And they're never really concerned about succession planning. So if you happen to have, if an owner has a son or a daughter that wants to take over, or a trusted employee, you see that. But more and more, you're just seeing these guys, kind of fade off into the sunset and either, like I said, roll equity over, stay on board, or just sell out in full. And you're going to see more and more of that as again, the baby boom and their population, starts to age out. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah, and it has to generate deals, in the future. And again, for our audience, and we're talking about some of the difficulties closing deals in the middle market today, but we're all looking forward to that time. No prediction yet when we get back to normal. But with that, I think, it rounds out episode 2 in this series. And for our audience, again, episode 3, we'll talk about some of those things, methods, ways to overcome these challenges, what the impact and methodologies are in diligence to overcome these challenges. Because at the end of the day, kind of teeing off something you said earlier, Paul, we're all here to help clients get deals done, whether they're buying or they're selling, and help companies be successful. So appreciate your thoughts and comments on this episode, and look forward to rounding out our discussion soon.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for having me. It's awesome. I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks, everyone out there, and thanks for listening in, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Capital Table. For more information, please visit withum.com. Thank you for listening.